And yes, I cut all my hair off because I was tired of having a toupee. Sorry. Nah, it's just, I get tired of messing with my hair, so I just cut it off. I figure I can move around faster. But today we're going to talk about one of the oldest, if not the oldest, street gang in all of Chicago. The Gaylords. Before you say anything, before you think anything, it's one of the oldest street gangs in Chicago. It was a white gang. Whites were also banging. It just wasn't blacks and Spanish. They were also in gangs banging. They weren't the only ones. The black and Spanish gangs weren't the only ones sporting colors. Whites were banging also. And this is what I mean about Chicago being a gangster-ass city. Let's get into this. JC, Wrong Strong, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe, hit the bell, leave a comment, tell me what you think. I'm going to be going over a lot of the white gangs that are in Chicago that were there or are there. There's some that are active, there's some that are not. It's just history. It is a learning tool. It is me giving you a part of my story, me. Chicago is where I was born and raised, and it's part of my my channel, my life, pretty much my history. So I like to share this stuff with you guys because you guys are my Wrong and Strong family, and that's how it is. If you are on the wrong channel and you're looking for cooking lessons, then yeah, I don't know what to tell you. But my name's JC, and we're gonna talk about the Gaylords today. They are one of the oldest street gangs in Chicago. They were traced back to 1930. The name was created decades earlier, before GAY had like a meaning like it does today. Back then it described a light-hearted spirit, and all the gangs in Chicago usually have like a code. So like every letter means something, just like the gangs in California have the numbers for the alphabets and stuff like that. Same thing. So GAY standard for Great American Youth. They were originally were a softball team or a baseball team, but they were really into sports. And this is what I mean about the culture in Chicago, that a lot of these gangs started as youth centers, to get the kids out off the streets, and it's crazy how they morphed into gangs, you know what I mean? But they started as youth centers, athletic clubs, and sometime later they just morphed into gangs. This gang in particular ended up morphing into one of the biggest white gangs in the city. At the time, there was about 120 gangs in Chicago. Back then, there wasn't. They were founded in 1950 by Anthony and Bobby. They had hoods in Westtown, Southern Westtown, South Lawndale, Little Village, West Side. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because, Little Village being where I was, where my family came over in the 50s and, set their roots, was Little Village, who was to known that it's always, it was a different neighborhood back then, and back then there was a lot of white gangs, and I'll go over all of them just because I need to explain how the Gaylords had a lot of white pride stance, but were not white supremacists. In fact, they kicked out the neo-Nazis out of Irving Park, decades ago. There was a lot of Hispanic families living in their hoods that were well respected and well taken care of, and I want to point that out, big time, because in Chicago it was a lot different. It was more about taking care of the neighborhood. Yes, there was racism. Yes, there was, but not at the point where it was segregated so much how it is in other like cities, like California, stuff like that to this day, where it's very, very segregated. There's now, in Chicago and Illinois, there is, white land kings. There's white black gangster disciples. It's very different, and this is why I share these stories and I share this knowledge, because, like I told you guys, like this is part of me. This is part of my life. This is part of where I grew up. This is part of the adventure that I've taken on giving people knowledge now instead of promoting it. You know what I mean? So in the 1950, the raising Latino immigration, it escalated like big time for like 1950 to 1960. That's when my grandfather came over, and they set their roots in Little Village. Back then, a lot of the families actually started packing up and moving out to the suburbs. Bolingbrook, Waukegan, Aurora, LaGrange, all those areas, they started moving out. It's actually, they called it the white flight. It's when all the neighborhoods in Chicago started to change, because Little Village was actually like all Irish, Polish. It was all workers that were working in the railroads that are in that area on 31st. There's a lot of people that are not they don't know that hood. That whole hood is surrounded by the railroad tracks. So a lot of people actually moved there to actually work there. So yeah, the white flight was one of the biggest changes in the neighborhood in Chicago, where everybody moved out to the suburbs. So Little Village wasn't always Mexican. Go figure. Alright. 25th and Rockwell. A motorcycle club called the Outlaws opened up a garage clubhouse that I think it's still there to this day. And if somebody lives in that area, is watching my videos, please let me know. Drop me a comment. Let me know if it's still there, because I still believe that, when I was in Chicago, I remember still seeing the club there. So 25th and Rockwell. Motorcycle club called the Outlaws. They're in MC, yes. Opened up a clubhouse way back then. Okay, with no time at all. The Outlaws were not liked in the community. Why? Probably because of motorcycles. Probably because, back then, a lot of these gangs were like greaser gangs. So if you guys are not familiar with that term, it's almost like, I want to say, if you guys ever watched that movie, Deuces, where like it's the white kids that, roll up the cigarettes right here on their white shirts. Wearing the jeans, but hey, they were still banging. So, a group of men created their own clubhouse, and this is where the Gaylords were born, in Little Village. They opened up a motorcycle shop right across the street from the Outlaws. This heated up things between them, but headquarters for the Gaylords in Little Village ended up being 24th and Whipple, and that's where it all started. And if you don't believe me, you could actually look up at the Chicago news article at Chicago Tribune, March 3rd, 1954, where a big fight happened between the Outlaws and the Gaylords after a baseball game, I believe. And I think it was a baseball game or a basketball game, but they beat them. And this is what I mean about the culture in Chicago, is that it's always been like sports. Sports has played a big role in neighborhoods. I think this is why there's diehard fans, that root for the Bears, the Cubs, even though they always lose. So, like, this is where it comes from. But there's an article on the Chicago Tribune that I looked up. It was March 3rd, 1954, where they got into a really big fight. It was like 50 gang members. Some went to prison, some didn't. It was a big thing. But their colors were gray and blue. That they ended up owning those colors later on into like their gang stuff. They started fighting gangs like the SDs and the Land Kings and the Black Gangs, once they started moving in. The Gaylords, actually, the Gaylords in Little Village came to an abrupt end as soon as the Vietnam War started. Because a lot of them had the spirit of serving my country. Hey, thank you for your service. And they actually left and went to serve to Vietnam in 1965, 1966. And by 1966, 24th and Marshall Boulevard was completely handed over to the Land Kings. I mean, through the time, if you're from Chicago, the North Side is the legacy that they hold the strongest ever to be. They're like the strongest story to ever be told about the Gaylords. But in the 1960s, the South Side was probably their largest sections ever, especially on 55th and Ashland. And the thing about the gangs in Chicago is that they are like businesses. So you know how you have a Burger King on so-and-so street, but they're all over? That's how the gangs operate in Chicago. So you'll have a section of Land Kings on the north side. You'll have a section of Land Kings on the south side. You'll have a section of Land Kings in the suburbs. You'll have a section of Land Kings on 55th. And they're all the same gang. It's all the same thing. All the same colors, all the same rules. They are one. There is no fighting between them. They're all one. Yes, there has been times where they have a breach of power and they fight for stuff like that. But 9 out of 10 times everybody's together, and this is what makes them so powerful and so big. To this day, I think that the Gaylords still hold some hoods in the north side. I am not sure. I am just sharing of what I know from back in my day. I started doing research on this whole gang culture once I went into prison because, my biggest thing was to figure out why is it so normal in Chicago to be involved with, if you're not involved with a party crew, you're involved with a gang. It's very, very normal. So, I wanted to do a lot of research on why it was like this. And, a lot of these gangs, started as just, protecting their neighborhood from outsiders, protecting their people that lived there. And they just morphed into that. So, this is me, JC, Wrong and Strong, just giving you, learning tools. This is a channel for educational purposes and entertainment because you get to watch my shenanigans. And, like I always tell everybody, don't judge nobody. Give somebody a hug and stay in your lane. It's none of your business what everybody else is doing. If you don't like it, guess what? Turn the channel. That's all you have to do. Alright? Peace.